Few independent games have marked a generation as much as Hollow Knight. Released with a modest appearance but a gigantic soul, it conquered players with its melancholic world, its brutal difficulty, and an atmosphere that feels alive even in silence. But what really makes this game so special? And why, even after so many years, has no other managed to surpass it? I'm Matthew, and today we're going to dive deep into Hallowness to understand the reason for this phenomenon that still echoes among Metroidvania fans. When I think of Hollow Knight, the first thing that comes to mind is the almost hypnotic immersion that the game provokes. Hallowness is not just a setting, it's a living organism, abandoned, breathing through the echoes of a glorious past. Each narrow corridor, each forgotten ruin, conveys a silent melancholy that envelops you without needing words. You feel that there is something sacred, tragic, and beautiful in every detail, and this feeling doesn't come from a cutscene or dialogue, but from how the space itself communicates emotions. It's a type of environmental storytelling that few games manage to achieve. The most interesting thing is how the world design avoids the obvious. Hollow Knight doesn't hold your hand or explain why things are the way they are. Instead, it leaves you in the dark, literally, as it entrusts your curiosity. This creates a rare relationship between the player and the environment. That of an explorer and not just a protagonist completing tasks. Each discovery, each new area found, feels like a small secret that you yourself unearthed. And this feeling of conquest is what keeps me hooked for hours. It's like exploring a real cave, intimidating, mysterious, but irresistible. The cohesion of the world is another point that impresses too much. There are no loading screens between regions, and this gives a natural flow to the exploration that reinforces the illusion of being in a single, vast underground. You descend from the insect-filled ruins to collapsing cities, enter fluorescent forests or toxic swamps, and everything connects organically. This fluidity makes Hallowness seem real, like a place that exists independently of your presence, which is a feat in terms of design. With each new route, the map expands but never loses its sense of coherence, and this makes the journey never seem fragmented. Something I love is how the game works with contrast. Areas like Green Path welcome you with vibrant tones and dense vegetation after so much gray and stone, and this change has more impact because the world is one, continuous. When you return to old locations with new abilities, you notice shortcuts and connections that were right in front of your eyes, but only now make sense. It's a silent reward, and now you understand that replaces the markers and indications that many modern games use. This respect for the player's perception is what gives authenticity to the design. The atmosphere is also built on the way sound and silence coexist. The soundtrack, or the absence of it, creates a rhythm breathing along with the world. In more deserted areas, the sound of your own footsteps echoes in an almost meditative way, reinforcing the loneliness. When a melody arises, it doesn't come to force emotion, but to whisper the weight of what was lost. This subtle approach makes me think that Hollow Knight is less an action game and more a melancholic letter to a dead empire, told through cracked walls and distant noises. The most curious thing is how this melancholy doesn't tire. On the contrary, it attracts. Even in the face of the sadness that permeates the scenery, there is a beauty in deciphering Hallowness. Perhaps because there is hope in every discovery, in every remnant of life and memory that you find. The lack of clear explanations is not a flaw. It's part of the game's language. Hollow Knight communicates through absence, and this gives the player space to project their own interpretations, creating an intimate, almost personal experience. Everyone sees a different Hallowness. What strikes me most is this constant feeling of belonging and estrangement at the same time. Hallowness never fully reveals itself. It accepts you but also keeps you as an outsider. And it is exactly this ambiguity, this silent invitation to get lost and find yourself, that makes Hollow Knight's design a unique work. The world doesn't want to be dominated, it wants to be listened to. And the more you listen, the more you realize that the story it tells is in the walls, in the wind, and in the silence between one jump and another. The balance of difficulty in Hollow Knight is one of the greatest proofs that frustration can be converted into pleasure when well dosed. It's not a game that tries to punish you, it wants to teach you all the time, even if harshly. From the first enemy to the most intimidating bosses, everything is designed to test perception and patience, not just reflexes. Death has weight. Yes, but never enough to seem an insurmountable barrier. You feel that each mistake is yours and that each victory is the result of learning, not luck. And this creates a very strong connection between player and mechanics. The checkpoint system, based on the benches scattered throughout Hallownest, is one of the most intelligent details of this balance. They are positioned in a way that requires care and exploration, but also offers psychological security. The simple act of finding a bench and saving progress brings a true sense of relief, because you know how much it took to conquer that point. This cadence of risk and reward creates an organic progression, encouraging the player to continue even after several falls. It's a game that knows how to put the right weight on defeat, enough to generate respect, but never enough to provoke giving up. The way the game deals with failure is almost philosophical. When we die, we leave a shadow that needs to be faced to recover what was lost. This mechanic transforms failure into part of the journey. Death is not an end, but a reminder of caution, of observation, and of self-control. And the most beautiful thing is that, when returning and defeating this shadow, the player explicitly feels that they have overcome themselves. It's a simple but powerful metaphor about growth and resilience, fully integrated into the gameplay, without needing cutscenes or explanations. The bosses are, without a doubt, the apex of this philosophy of balanced challenge. None of them are dishonest. What defines each battle is not the damage they cause, but the refinement of the patterns, the clarity of the rules, and the way the game encourages you to study each movement. There is an almost musical rhythm in these fights. Observe, adapt. And when you finally manage to win, the satisfaction is enormous because the game never cheats. It always plays fair, and that makes all the difference. Each boss is a line of learning, a conversation between player and design. This transparency in the challenge is something that is lacking in many modern games. Hollow Knight never humiliates you, but it doesn't spare you either. It invites you to face the fear of making mistakes and rewards you with the authentic feeling of conquest. Even when you go through moments of frustration, there is an internal voice that says, "I understand what I did wrong, I can improve." This awareness is the basis of the pleasure of playing something challenging. It's pure stimulus, born from the confidence that the game has in your ability. Winning in Hollow Knight is an experience that transcends the screen. It's not just defeating an enemy, but proving to yourself that persistence is worth it. The feeling after a difficult fight is almost physical, a mixture of exhaustion and euphoria, of respect for the challenge and pride in overcoming it. The game builds this with mastery, balancing hardness with justice, and leaving a clear message. The true pleasure of playing is not in winning easily, but in conquering the impossible with your own hands. The balance of difficulty is also sustained by the flexibility of the abilities. Over time, the player realizes that the apparent difficulty is, in part, their lack of resources or strategies. By unlocking new charms, blows, and movements, the same boss that seemed impossible becomes manageable. This reinforces the idea of real evolution, not only of the character, but of the player himself. The learning curve is designed with patience, respecting your rhythm, but without ever denying the necessary effort. The art of Hollow Knight is the kind of thing that seems simple at first glance, but the more you observe, the more you realize how much it carries of feeling and intention. The hand-drawn stroke gives identity to each form, each small enemy, each underground corner of Hallownest. Everything there has a dark and melancholic charm that, without needing to say anything, already creates the atmosphere of the journey. The style is delicate, almost childlike in proportion, but this contrasts with the emotional weight of the world, generating a unique mixture of cuteness and loneliness. This contrast is what makes the aesthetics of Hollow Knight so striking. Beautiful, but sad. Minimalist, but profound. The animations are a spectacle in themselves. They are incredibly fluid, full of personality. The simple movement of the main character, the subtle swing of the mantle, or the light impact when he touches the ground, convey a sense of impeccable control and presence. Each enemy has its own way of moving and attacking, which makes each combat visually interesting, not only because of the difficulty, but because of the almost theatrical character of each encounter. It's like watching a carefully choreographed dance in the middle of a world in ruins. The color palette contributes strongly to the emotional tone of each region. Hollow Knight doesn't use colors just to embellish, but to communicate. The bluish gray of the ancient ruins gives a feeling of mourning and oblivion. The vibrant green of Greenpath brings a fragile hope of life. The orange of the infection expresses corruption and pain. The game communicates with the player through these colors, conducting the state of mind in each stretch of the journey without needing a single line of dialogue. This subtlety is a rare merit, and it's what makes me feel that each color there has a narrative purpose. Another fascinating point is the use of shadows and light. The game creates visual depth with few resources, and this is of an impressive elegance. The shadows accentuate the isolation of the underground world, while the light, whether from a lantern, a bonfire, or a distant window, serves as small points of hope. This relationship between light and dark is almost symbolic, reinforcing the silent struggle of the protagonist. There are areas where the lack of lighting provokes real fear, and others where a simple glow in the background suggests that something important is ahead. The game uses lighting as narrative, and this visual care helps to keep the mystery always alive. The visual design of the areas also carries distinct emotions. In City of Tears, for example, the constant rain and the bluish reflections of the lights create a tone of almost poetic melancholy. In the Fungal Wastes, the foggy and mutant environment conveys strangeness and discomfort. Crystal Peak, with its vibrant and sharp colors, pulsates with a type of sad beauty, a beautiful but oppressive place. Each scenario is more than a backdrop. It's a character that speaks through art. And when you stand still for a while just observing, you realize that the world breathes. The absence of long dialogues or explicit explanations makes the art of Hollow Knight work double. The characters have looks and gestures that communicate more than words would be able to. Characters like Grimm or Hornet have a magnetic presence not only because of what they say, but because of how they move, because of how their animation carries intentions, stories, and sometimes pain. Visual communication is the true soul of this game. It's the sad look of an old bug, the hesitant movement of an enemy that seems to regret attacking you, the environment that seems to observe you in silence. The most beautiful thing of all is that, through this art and these animations, Hollow Knight invites the player to contemplation. It's a game where stopping for a few seconds and just observing becomes an experience in itself. Each detail was designed with love and purpose, and this makes the world seem handmade, real, even in its fantasy. There are no excesses, no ostentation, just a rare authenticity, where each line, shadow, and color tells a silent story about a world that was once full of life and now rests in eternal melancholy. The soundtrack is one of those sound experiences that stick in your memory and are capable of radically changing the way we feel the world of Hallownest. Composed by the talented Christopher Larkin, the soundtrack builds atmospheres that not only accompany the narrative, but practically tell the story along with the player. Each track seems to have been created to echo a specific feeling. The loneliness of the desolate corridors, the hope hidden in areas like Greenpath, and the growing tension in the confrontations. Playing Hollow Knight without headphones is like visiting a cathedral wearing a blindfold. You even understand the space, but you lose the soul of it all. The role of the music goes beyond background sound. It guides the emotions without ever being invasive, fitting into the moments of exploration, contemplation, and danger in a subtle way. When you first enter Dirtmouth and hear those melancholic chords, you immediately understand the weight of the abandonment of that village. The soundtrack connects to the player's experience with a rare honesty, almost as if you were listening to the world itself trying to remember its forgotten history. This creates an emotional connection that remains even outside the game, a fundamental detail for titles that seek total immersion. The absolute highlight in the soundtrack goes to the boss music. Each boss has its own theme marked by tension, urgency, and drama. The soundtrack manages to capture, with precision, the feeling of doubting yourself in the face of gigantic adversaries. Themes like those of the Mantis Lords, Hollow Knight, Hornet, and others transform each fight into a musical spectacle that intensifies the adrenaline and reinforces the character of each antagonist. It's as if the music said, "Now it's all or nothing," pulsing along with the rhythm of the combat. In these moments, it seems that even the controller vibrates according to the crescendo of the instruments. The use of melancholy is another unique element of Larkin's work. The soundtrack is not afraid of silence and uses pauses and soft notes to amplify the feeling of loneliness and desolation. In Hollow Knight, the void is not simply absence, it's meaning. Walking through Hallownest while a discreet melody plays in the background makes the loneliness seem grandiose, as if you were exploring the ruins of a lost civilization with respect and longing. And this, instead of demotivating, only inspires more exploration because each piece of the scenery seems to hide a new story to be heard. The music also contributes to the identity of each area, just as the visual design does. The languid piano of City of Tears, the restless percussion of Crystal Peak, or the strange minimalism of Fungal Wastes. All these themes convey specific emotions and help the player to situate themselves not only on the map, but in the very feeling of that environment. This type of integration shows a rare synergy between soundtrack and level design, where one reinforces the other all the time, making each moment unforgettable. During the longer explorations, the music never repeats to exhaustion, avoiding the auditory fatigue that extensive games often bring. Instead, it arises at the right moments, withdraws when necessary, and returns with force when the narrative demands. It seems almost a conversation between the composer, the world, and the player. This respect for silence makes each return of the soundtrack even more impactful, reinforcing the weight of the discoveries and frustrations. Deep down, the soundtrack of Hollow Knight is an embrace and a challenge. It welcomes in moments of fragility, but also presses in the combats, accelerating the player's heart while reinforcing the melancholic and mysterious tone of the adventure. The music doesn't allow you to forget the history of Hollow Knight. It makes a point of remembering, note by note, that in that silence, in that mystery, there is something that is worth discovering, hearing, and feeling. Hollow Knight revolutionized the traditional mechanics of a Metroidvania by offering an intelligent combination of progression, abilities, and exploration that encourages returning to already explored locations, now transformed by new acquired abilities. One of the most striking innovations is the way the abilities complement each other, creating a sense of true personalization in the gaming experience, in addition to encouraging the revisiting of areas. For example, by unlocking a new movement, such as the dash or the double jump, the player can access previously inaccessible passages, explore hidden areas, find secrets, and collect items that further enhance their power and possibilities within Hollow Knight. Another revealing aspect is the system of upgrades and abilities, which functions as a true vector of freedom. The charms, for example, allow the player to adapt their combat and exploration style according to their preferences, combining different effects and strategies. These upgrades not only increase the character's power, but also provide a more fluid and dynamic experience, keeping the game always interesting. Thus, the protagonist becomes a kind of mirror of the choices that the player makes, which can vary greatly depending on the path of upgrades selected. In addition, the structure of the game encourages continuous exploration through a meticulous design of interconnected maps. Each new discovered ability functions as a key that opens doors to new secrets, shortcuts, and hidden areas, strengthening the feeling that the world of Hollow Knight is alive and reactive. Even the areas that seem completed can be revisited with new abilities, revealing new items, characters, or simply a new perspective, which reinforces the idea that the gaming experience is always evolving, giving the player the feeling of conquering a larger world with each advance. The progression system also favors the progressive challenge, which is a trademark of the game. As you advance, the enemies and bosses become faster and more dangerous, requiring the player to use their abilities in an increasingly strategic way. This escalation of difficulty, combined with the system of abilities that allows varied combinations, makes each achievement even more rewarding. You not only feel that you have overcome a challenge, but that you are evolving as a player, adjusting your style to the new demands of the world. Despite a linear structure in the main progression, Hollow Knight allows almost total freedom in the exploration of secrets and collection of upgrades. This gives a sense of personalization, where each player can create their own route and style of play. The possibility of choosing which abilities to improve first and which areas to explore in search of particular items makes each game unique. This system promotes a continuous adventure, always motivating the player to return to areas already dominated, now with a renewed and more powerful approach. Hollow Knight's innovation also lies in its way of communicating progress. The game gives you the tools, challenges you fairly, and lets you discover your own pace of evolution. The combination of abilities, upgrades, exploration not only sustains a fluid and engaging gameplay, but also makes each victory a deeply rewarding personal achievement. In this balance between challenge and freedom, Hollow Knight not only writes an adventure story, but a journey of learning and overcoming that is reflected in the satisfaction of each new advance. Hollow Knight is a masterpiece when it comes to subtle narrative and environmental storytelling, transforming the absence of explicit dialogues into a powerful invitation to imagination and personal interpretation. The game uses every corner of its world to tell pieces of a larger story, where the scenery, the characters, and even the enemies have something to reveal, if you are willing to pay attention. This technique, called environmental storytelling, not only delivers information but also creates deep emotions, such as loneliness, loss, and hope, immersing the player in an experience that goes beyond the obvious. Unlike many linear narratives in games, Hollow Knight doesn't force you to follow a closed script. Instead, it presents fragments of Hollow Knight's tragic past at distinct moments, whether through secret letters, relics, small enigmatic dialogues, or simply the arrangement of the environments. These pieces, scattered across the map, form an emotional puzzle where the player is encouraged to put the pieces together, creating their own interpretations. This slow and fragmented construction makes the immersion active, not passive. You don't receive the story ready-made, you live it and discover it. Direct interaction with characters, for example, doesn't deliver clear answers but rather clues and emotions. Characters like the Hollow Knight, Hornet, and Quirrell carry their own mystery and pain, and by visiting each of the places they frequent, the player feels that they are reading between the lines of a larger and more complex story. This makes the world of Hallownest much richer, as it is not only the events that count, but the context and the relationships that you interpret throughout the adventure. The setting of each area further reinforces this narrative concept. Ruins covered in moss, dark caves, cities submerged in sadness. Each scenario is a visual and emotional chapter in the history of the kingdom. While exploring, the player feels the decay, the oblivion, and also the echoes of past glory, which give a poetic tone to the journey. This melancholic dimension is fundamental to the success of the narrative proposal, as it transforms Hallownest into a living character who breathes its own story. One of the greatest beauties of this way of telling the story is the space it leaves for the player to construct theories. There is no feeling that the game wants to impose a truth on you, but rather that it offers a stage for your understanding and debate. This creates a vibrant community where interpretations of Hallownest's past are discussed, analyzed, and even reinvented, which prolongs the life of the game and maintains interest far beyond the initial experience. This subtle narrative style gives Hollow Knight a rare depth which even more casual players can feel, albeit unconsciously. It is a story to be felt, not just heard or read, and this emotional nuance is what gives the game an almost poetic air. It's not just another game with bosses and platforms, it's an exploration of memory and loss, hidden in the shadows of a world that, although silent, has much to say. Hollow Knight's subtle narrative is not a flaw or limitation, but its greatest asset. Through environmental storytelling, the game invites each one to be an author in their own way, to discover the past of Hallownest with their own eyes, and to feel, in their own skin, the tragedy and hope of a kingdom that was too great to be fully understood all at once. Hollow Knight has surpassed the barrier of a simple game to become a true cultural movement, built on a passionate and active community that contributes in various ways to keep the flame alive. Fans have created countless theories about the hidden history of Hallownest, elaborated fan arts that expand the visual universe of the game, and developed modifications that further personalize and enrich the experience. This constant interaction between creators and players has strengthened a collective feeling of belonging and admiration, making Team Cherry's work a phenomenon beyond entertainment. Hollow Knight's legacy within the Metroidvania genre is undeniable and inspiring. It redefined standards with its combination of difficulty, setting, and fluid exploration, influencing important titles such as Ender Lilies and Blasphemous. These games, among others, borrowed both the melancholic atmosphere and the integrated progression structure and the cohesive world design that Hollow Knight established. Critical reception and impact on multiple platforms consolidate the game's importance as a modern reference for indie developers and fans of the genre. The success of Silksong is not merely a product of hype, but rather a direct reflection of the lasting impact that the first game had on the industry and the gaming community. Silksong leverages this solid foundation to innovate and expand the universe, bringing a new protagonist and an unprecedented world, which maintains the essence of the series while presenting mechanical and narrative novelties. Team Cherry's careful and respectful follow-up with its fans, which includes continuous support and attention to the demands of the community, has strengthened this relationship, making the release of Silksong one of the most successful in the indie scene in recent years. In addition, Team Cherry demonstrates a rare commitment to its player base, prioritizing post-launch support and direct relationship with the community. This care, combined with the exemplary quality of the games, creates a feedback effect that keeps the franchise's popularity alive and growing, even years after the original release. This makes Hollow Knight not just a game, but a living experience with a community that feels part of the construction and constant evolution of the series. Hollow Knight's legacy goes far beyond its gameplay and narrative. It establishes itself as a cultural milestone, a point of reference for developers and players, and a living example of how independent games can conquer space and respect worldwide. Silksong represents the natural expansion of this impact, pointing to the future of the franchise and the Metroidvania genre as a whole, reinforcing the influence and passion that this universe has created